The Undertaker being ruled by his wife, Michelle McCool, with her essentially taking over his podcast recently, and Marlon Wayans recently being punked by a woman not his wife, just a fellow actor, Julia Fox. And I wanted to use these two stories to further highlight the utter emasculation of men and Western men in particular in this matriarchy that feminist females still like to call a patriarchy. And that's why I asked the question, well, why Western men simp? Well, let's first start with the Undertaker. I mean, Undertaker, he's a standard husband, happy wife, happy life. Yes, dear, my better half. I mean, he's just another one of those types. So when people see Mean Mark, who people have been jokingly referring to as Mark McCool, giving him his wife's gimmick last name, in reality, all they're witnessing is a typical relationship between a man and a woman in America. Because that's what is expected of men, is to be subservient to their wives, to their girlfriends. And the only difference here is that it's on a more public stage. But I can guarantee you, some of the same men who are sort of looking at Undertaker, oh, why is he tolerating all this? Why is he allowing all this? I can guarantee you the overwhelming majority of those men who are in relationships, either a boyfriend to someone or a husband to a woman, they are run by their woman too. Because if they don't submit to their female, then, they are viewed as a bad guy to that woman. Now, if it's a man that has a violent streak, a thug man, then they are provided more leeway. They get away with a lot more, even though there's still women that try them. But in those situations, the consequences usually end up as a violent result or murder. But generally, women understand and know that they can get away with this sort of attitude with the men that they're in relationship with. And if that man's not willing to put up with it, there's thousands of other simps lined up, especially if the female has any sort of attraction about her. And then we know that the rules, the laws are in favor of females. And again, in general, based on the liberal ideology that runs this country, men are sort of trained to be, suckers for women. Now and again, this comes from a guy that sat next to Trump, championed him for president, to a lip-tarded guy that sits next to his fake daughter. I mean, his daughter that pretends to be his fake son, who avows all of the liberal nonsense. Which now brings me to the Marlon Wayans portion. Marlon Wayans, again, he's not even married to this woman. And just like Michelle McCool does to Undertaker on his podcast, Julia Fox was constantly interrupting him. Now, with the Marlon Wayans type, you sort of expect it because, we know he's a liberal loon. He made a career cross-dressing as a woman, particularly with white chicks. So you don't really expect any masculinity from him. Now, one would wonder, well, he is a Negro. Doesn't he have more of a higher status, higher claim to victimhood because he's black and Julia Fox is white? Well, in some ways, yes, but in many ways, no, because at the end of the day, she's still a woman. And women on the victimhood hierarchy women as a collective are still seen as bigger victims than men as a collective, and that includes Negro males as well. That's why if you haven't noticed when people are talking about white supremacy and races, it's mainly directed towards heterosexual white men. Not even homosexual white men, heterosexual white men. And if they filter it a little bit more than that, it's heterosexual white men that you assume is conservative, votes Republican, Christian. But in general, it's just heterosexual white men. And so when Marlon Wayans is getting punked by Julia Fox, he recognizes the hierarchy, and he knows that even though he's a black male, he still can't put in the place a woman, because again, she's still a woman. Now, Julia Fox is lucky that she's dealing with a Hollywood black male that cares about his career, because in another circumstance, who knows, she may get stabbed to death like that Ukrainian woman. But since she was sitting next to a cross-dresser who masquerades his fake son, his daughter, his gender-confused daughter, I mean, again, she knows that she can get away with that. And women in general, these are just two celebrity men, but women in general know that they can be disrespectful while simultaneously claiming that they are perpetually oppressed as women in this society. And Julia Fox, I remember her specifically from Uncut Gems, where she was very hot in that movie. White chick, fat booty, really attractive in that film. Since then, she looks less attractive. She had these weird eyebrows, and I remember doing a video about her, like back when she used to date Kanye West. And when they broke up, she went on a whole little tirade. And I remember finding out that she used to be a dominatrix before she got into Hollywood, where she got paid by men to beat them, speaking of Simps. And I remember seeing a video of her where she was staying in like a rat-infested apartment, and she like was making an argument to justify the status of her junkie home or something like that. And then I also found out that she has a son, unfortunately. So, we can only imagine how ruined he's going to be with a woman like her for a mother. But yeah, what these two situations shows is that whether the woman's your wife or not your wife, the men are expected to be subservient to these females. And these modern women in the United States are very well aware of that, and they exploit it and take advantage of it all of the time. It's similar to the racial issue. When Negroes talk about how oppressed they are and how racist America still is, but yet they're the main ones being the most disrespectful and talking the most shit, and aren't afraid to put their face and names by it when they post, certain videos online, whether it's celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, defending a murderer of a white person, wishing death on the sitting president. They're racially oppressed, but they get away with 24/7 disrespecting white people and notable white people in general 24/7. And as it is with race and women with gender, same thing with the sexual identity politics, the identity politics layer of the unholy trinity of victimhood, of race, gender and sexual identity. Sexual identity people, again, play oppress while they get away with, having freak offs in public with the pride parade and actively threatening about sexually recruiting other people's kids and not being concerned at all that anybody will do anything to them in response. But yeah, I mean, it's all a part of it. But in this particular video, the focus is on the gender aspect of it. And yeah, why Western men simp? I mean, it's simple. That's it's the matriarchy that men allow and that women take full advantage of while still playing the victim. And it's the same thing with race, the same thing with the sexual identity nonsense. People that play the victim aren't the victims at all.